I remember reading the poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost a long time ago, and it may have been for like English academic team or high school or middle school, whenever I read it. And I remember interpreting it to myself, thinking, so I guess in the poem, either you could stop this right now and go Google it, and it'll take you like 5 seconds to read. He's going in the woods and it's a snowy evening and he's on a horse and he stops. He stops and he needs to keep going because it's the middle of the night and he still has a ways to go. There's no like lodging nearby, no place to stop. So he still needs to keep going on the horse, but he's really tempted to stop. So he stops and he says, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And I remember interpreting that for the first time, and I thought about how, sometimes when you're doing something that you really need to finish, and you stop at like the worst time, at the time where you need to not stop and need to continue, and you've got miles to go before you can sleep, before you can relax. And I remember going to class or like reading wherever, and finding out that like I was completely off or kind of off, and that sleep was a metaphor for death, and it was the feeling of death being alluring supposedly. And Robert Frost was saying, he's got miles to go before, like in life, before he stops living, so he's got to keep going even when it would be more appealing to stop. That got really dark, but I guess I'm going to take my own interpretation of that poem and I'm going to apply it to life in medical school leading up to an exam block, which is where we are again. And I think it's like, and like if you're a medical student, you're watching this, or like any really student, you're like, aha, miles to go before I sleep. Like, absolutely, I have to study all night. Not quite at that point yet, but I might be later in this week. So I think sometimes, like this weekend, for example, yesterday, there was like, I really needed to not be zoning out. I really needed to concentrate, and I really needed to catch up in the places where I was behind, and I really needed to focus, because I had miles to go before I could literally sleep, and I couldn't do it. And it was so appealing to not do it, and it was really frustrating that I felt so much like I didn't have the motivation, the brain power, the willpower, and so much was clouding me, making me nervous and stressed. And my nervous and stressed was keeping me from continuing the miles to get to the sleep. And that happens. So, like, yeah, when that happens, that sucks. In the poem, Frost refers to his horse, who seems confused that he has stopped in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night on a snowy evening. And he says, my little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. And I think that's how I feel sometimes when I'm like studying, like exactly like up until a test, and I'm like, yeah, like you don't have any window room to stop studying here right now, and you want to, or you feel tempted to. And I mean, I guess there's burnout, so if you're burnout, you obviously need to stop and reconvene, but sometimes right up until the test you need to keep reviewing, and you're just like, oh, maybe I could just go do something else. And you can't, because you have miles to go before you sleep. Anyways, so yeah, the horse. I need to find my metaphorical horse, because I think I find it usually eventually, but I need to make sure I find my metaphorical horse quicker that is telling me, no, like we will get to the end where we will rest, don't be distracted, calm down, continue. I would like to have some like interpretation of like my comparing this poem to feeling of like stress and anxiety when you're studying for something, or just doing anything that needs to get done, and feeling like you want to stop. I mean, like, obviously, like, the poem was actually just about life in general, which is way bigger, and I could talk about that too, but I have things to do, and I have miles to go before I sleep. That video might have been complete utter nonsense. So if it was, I'm sorry.